She needed a hero in the delivery room. Never expected her estranged billionaire husband to be that man. Victoria Green gripped the bed rails, every contraction slicing through her body with relentless force. The clock read 10:30 a.m., 14 hours into labor. Sweat soaked her hospital gown, her messy bun sticking to the back of her neck. Her mother, Grace, hovered nearby, offering quiet support, while Patricia, her doula, checked her breathing and adjusted pillows. The room felt like a small universe of tension and anticipation. Victoria had prepared herself to face this alone. Her phone lay on the counter, silent, just as it had for the past 3 weeks. The door burst open. Daniel Ashford stood there, hair tousled, suit wrinkled, eyes wide with panic and determination. "I'm here," he said, voice trembling. "And I'm not leaving." Shock froze her mid-breath. The man who had walked away during her pregnancy, her estranged billionaire husband, was suddenly here. How did a marriage fall apart so completely that she stopped expecting him to show up for their child's birth? Tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to catch tomorrow's story. Your support helps us bring more powerful, real-life stories like this one. Let's begin. Spring 2019 had brought a rare warmth to Chicago, the kind that coaxed people outdoors to the parks and along the lakefront. For Victoria Green, it brought the Art Institute of Chicago's Modern Wing, where she attended a charity gala focused on affordable housing. She had dressed thoughtfully, choosing a navy dress that balanced professionalism with understated elegance. Her work in sustainable urban development had given her a reputation among peers, and she felt a quiet pride that evening, mingling with donors and advocates who shared her mission. Victoria grew up in Bronzeville, the daughter of a high school English teacher and a postal worker. Her childhood home, filled with books and laughter, had instilled a love of learning and a respect for hard work. Her father had passed when she was in college, leaving her mother, Grace, to guide her and her siblings through the final years of adolescence. Victoria had earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University, and her focus on architecture became both a personal passion and a professional calling. She was committed to designing spaces that honored the communities they served, rather than displacing them, a vision that often drew admiration from industry insiders who were more accustomed to profit-driven projects. That evening at the Modern Wing, overlooking Millennium Park, her attention was drawn not only to the art, but to a man whose presence seemed intentional without trying to dominate the room. Daniel Ashford stood across the hall, impeccably dressed, yet his expression was focused more on understanding than impressing. He was 34, having recently assumed the role of CEO at Ashford Properties, a real estate company that had shaped major American skylines for 3 generations. Daniel carried the weight of his family legacy lightly in public, but privately, he was determined to redefine what his leadership meant, not just through profit, but through initiatives that touched people's lives. Victoria first noticed Daniel because he asked questions that revealed a genuine curiosity about her work, rather than the usual polite nodding most men in his position offered. He was captivated by her refusal to be impressed by his wealth or pedigree. In the world she inhabited, she had to rely on her own skills and vision to be recognized. That independence intrigued him. He approached her table with a confident, measured step, introducing himself with a handshake that was firm but not overbearing. Their conversation began with the gala's focus, affordable housing and sustainable design, but quickly expanded to broader topics. They spoke about Chicago neighborhoods, the importance of community input in architectural planning, and even shared thoughts on urban policy. Victoria was cautious at first, aware of the charm that wealth could carry, but Daniel's questions were thoughtful, informed, and without condescension. He was not attempting to dominate the conversation, but to engage genuinely. Over the course of the evening, he demonstrated not just interest, but respect for her ideas. She responded in kind, asking incisive questions about his company's expansion plans and the social responsibility strategies he envisioned. Over the next 18 months, their courtship moved at a pace that was neither rushed nor superficial. Daniel invited Victoria to charity events, board meetings, and informal discussions about development projects, always including her perspective. He was persistent but patient, never pushing, never attempting to rush decisions. The family's old money expectations lingered on the periphery, as Daniel's mother and siblings had assumed he would marry within familiar social circles. Victoria felt those unspoken pressures subtly through the occasional remarks or sideways glances at family gatherings she had attended, but Daniel's consistent support insulated her from most of the tension. It was on a spring evening atop the Willis Tower observation deck that Daniel proposed. The city stretched out below, lights sparkling against the darkening sky, but Victoria's focus was entirely on him. Daniel spoke not of wealth or status, but of partnership, respect, and a shared vision for life together. He acknowledged the differences in their worlds and expressed a desire to honor both her roots in Bronzeville and his family legacy in New England. Victoria said yes, knowing that their future would require navigating both love and complexity. Their wedding in June 2021 took place at the Chicago Botanic Garden in Glencoe, surrounded by blooming flora and the laughter of family and friends. Victoria's family brought warmth, music, and a sense of home, while Daniel's attended with polite composure, occasionally tinged with curiosity and subtle judgment. The ceremony celebrated the union of two people from very different worlds, bound by mutual admiration and a shared commitment to making a meaningful life together. Photographs captured moments of genuine joy, the bride and groom smiling in ways that reflected both excitement and relief, alongside images of families observing the merging of their separate histories with restrained acknowledgement. During this period, the foundation of their marriage was strong, built on conversations, shared values, and deliberate choices. They began envisioning a future together that honored both personal and professional aspirations, understanding that the real challenge would be balancing ambition with partnership. The early days after the wedding were filled with planning, excitement, and the gradual blending of their lives, laying the groundwork for what they hoped would be a lasting union. Even in those initial months, the contrast between Victoria's community-focused work and Daniel's corporate responsibilities created subtle tensions, though neither yet fully understood the scope of what those differences might demand. What seemed like a perfect alignment in shared ideals was quietly testing the resilience of their connection, hinting at challenges that would later demand courage, presence, and difficult choices. After their wedding, Victoria and Daniel moved into a Gold Coast penthouse, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered sweeping views of Lake Michigan. The apartment reflected their combined sensibilities: modern lines, warm wood accents, and art that reminded them of Chicago's vibrant culture. At first, the space felt like a fresh start, a place to build routines and create shared memories. Victoria immersed herself in her work, opening Green Designs, a firm dedicated to community-centered mixed-use developments. She wanted projects that honored neighborhoods rather than displacing them. Her team grew quickly, and her reputation as an architect with a socially conscious vision expanded. She celebrated each new client, each innovative design, and the small victories that proved her professional worth. Daniel's career, however, demanded an intensity that Victoria had not fully anticipated. Ashford Properties was expanding aggressively into new markets: Miami, Austin, Denver, and Daniel felt the weight of a family legacy that had been built over generations. Board meetings, conference calls, and investor dinners filled his days. Even when he returned home, his attention was fractured, the mind that calculated mergers and acquisitions often absent from conversations at the dinner table. Victoria noticed his absence more acutely with every passing week. Dinners became solitary affairs, sometimes with a meal left untouched for hours while she waited for his attention. Conversations that once sparked laughter and connection devolved into check-ins about schedules or brief exchanges about logistics. Victoria tried to be patient, reminding herself that Daniel's dedication to his work was part of his responsibility to their future. Still, the loneliness accumulated, a quiet tension that neither could ignore. Daniel felt the pressure acutely. He wanted to honor his family's expectations while proving himself as a capable husband. He feared failure, not only in the boardroom, but in the very personal realm of marriage. His attempts to balance these competing demands often left him exhausted and distracted. Victoria could see the strain etched in his face, in the tense lines around his eyes, and she understood the professional demands he faced. What troubled her was the emotional distance that seemed to grow each day, as if the very presence that had drawn her to him during their courtship was slipping through her fingers. Amid the challenges at home, Victoria achieved a major professional milestone. She secured a contract to design a community center in Englewood, one of Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods. It was a project that mattered to her deeply, an opportunity to create space that could transform lives. She arranged a small celebration dinner at a local restaurant, inviting a few close colleagues and mentors to mark the occasion. She hoped Daniel would be there to share in the joy, to witness the realization of a vision that had consumed months of dedication and late nights. Daniel, however, received an unexpected call about an urgent deal in Houston. The meeting was last minute and non-negotiable. He promised to make it up to Victoria, but his absence at the celebration dinner was undeniable. She ate quietly, smiling for the sake of others at the table, but the emptiness at her side reminded her that their marriage had shifted. Moments that should have been shared became reminders of the widening gap between them. In the weeks that followed, this pattern continued. Daniel's travel intensified, while Victoria's achievements multiplied. They lived in the same apartment, shared meals in passing, and occasionally engaged in brief conversations, but the depth of their connection waned. Their marriage existed in a form that was surface-level functional, but lacking the emotional engagement that had defined their early days together. Victoria grappled with conflicting emotions. She loved Daniel and appreciated the ways he had supported her ambitions. At the same time, she wrestled with frustration and disappointment, recognizing that professional success could not fill the void left by an absent partner. Her reflections were quiet but insistent. A marriage, she realized, required presence, not just proximity. For Daniel, the distance was both intentional and unintentional. He believed he was working toward a future that would justify the sacrifices of the present, yet he underestimated the toll his absence was taking on the woman he had promised to support. Each missed dinner, each late-night call from a hotel room, accumulated like small reminders that the partnership he had envisioned was faltering. He saw her victories, admired them, but often felt powerless to fully participate, caught between competing responsibilities and his own insecurities. Despite the growing tension, there were moments that reminded them of why they had chosen each other. A shared glance over coffee in the early morning, a brief acknowledgement of each other's accomplishments, or a quiet evening spent reviewing architectural plans together hinted at the intimacy they once had. These moments were fleeting, but they kept alive the possibility of connection, even as the larger pattern of absence threatened to dominate. By the end of their first year, the penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan had become a space of contrasts, a place of professional triumphs and personal isolation, of shared ambition and emotional gaps. Victoria and Daniel were successful in their respective pursuits, but the emotional foundation of their marriage showed the first real cracks. They both sensed that sustaining a life together would require more than proximity, more than shared addresses or joint accounts. It would require presence, attention, and the courage to confront the discomfort of imbalance. This period of their marriage laid the groundwork for the events that would follow. The victories, the absences, the quiet reflections, they all contributed to the tension building beneath the surface, the gap between partnership in principle and partnership in practice. It was in this context, surrounded by accomplishments yet feeling increasingly alone, that Victoria would encounter challenges that demanded clarity, resilience, and the difficult decisions that accompany love tested by distance. By November 2022, Victoria Green was 3 months pregnant, a development she and Daniel had kept private until the second trimester. The pregnancy had been a surprise, unplanned but welcomed with cautious excitement. Victoria had told only a few close friends and family members, aware of the delicate balance between joy and concern. Thanksgiving that year brought the couple to the Ashford family estate in Newport, Rhode Island, an imposing mansion with sweeping lawns and manicured gardens. The grandeur of the home reflected generations of wealth and social influence, but Victoria had never felt entirely comfortable there. She moved through the rooms politely, offering smiles and greetings, aware that she was under constant scrutiny. Dinner began with the usual formalities: polished silverware, a long table adorned with autumnal centerpieces, and conversations measured in tone and content. Victoria was careful to engage respectfully, listening to her husband's family recounting achievements and events from their social circles. She felt Daniel beside her, but even his presence could not shield her from subtle judgments. Catherine Ashford, Daniel's mother, directed a comment at Victoria, her tone sweet but condescending. "It's fortunate Daniel has a wife who is taking a break from work for more traditional pursuits," she said, implying that Victoria's professional achievements were secondary to her domestic role. The words hung in the air, carefully chosen to minimize Victoria's efforts while elevating Daniel's position. Victoria responded calmly, her voice measured but firm. "Actually, I've been expanding my firm and recently hired 2 new associates. My work continues alongside preparing for this baby." The correction was factual, yet polite, intended to assert her accomplishments without escalating conflict. Catherine's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Of course," she replied, with an edge that implied disapproval. "It's important to remember the expectations that come with the Ashford name: proper upbringing, family priorities, social responsibilities." The comment struck Victoria as dismissive, reducing her identity to an accessory of her husband's family rather than recognizing her own achievements and integrity. Daniel remained silent, his fork cutting through the turkey in deliberate, controlled movements. He made no attempt to respond, no gesture of defense or support. His lack of intervention spoke louder than words, and Victoria felt the sting of isolation in a room full of people. The gap between them, once manageable, now seemed impossible to ignore. Later that evening, in the guest room, the tension erupted. Victoria confronted Daniel directly, her voice trembling with frustration and fatigue. "You didn't speak up," she said. "You let her diminish me at the table. Are you really going to let your mother treat me like this while you sit there?" Daniel's response was defensive, laced with exhaustion and irritation. "You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. It wasn't worth the argument in front of everyone." Victoria's frustration boiled over. "I'm picking my battles," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "And I'm losing the most important one, the battle to have a husband who actually has my back. I can't do this alone, Daniel. I thought I could trust you, but tonight showed me otherwise." Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes reflecting both guilt and a stubborn need to protect his own discomfort. The room felt small, heavy with unspoken words and raw emotion. For Victoria, the realization that her partner could not, or would not, stand beside her when it mattered most was devastating. She packed lightly that night, her movements deliberate, her mind racing with clarity about what she could and could not accept. The following morning, she left Newport alone, taking the train to Boston before flying back to Chicago. The trip was quiet, reflective. She considered the weight of her decisions, the implications for her marriage, and the environment in which her child would eventually grow. The loneliness of the ride was tempered by a growing resolve. She would not sacrifice her dignity or self-respect, even for love. This episode marked a pivotal turning point in their relationship. The tension at the Ashford estate crystallized long-standing issues. Daniel's failure to defend her, the subtle biases she faced, and the emotional gap that had widened over the previous year. Victoria recognized that partnership required more than shared addresses or mutual affection. It required advocacy, presence, and respect that could withstand external pressures. By leaving Newport, Victoria claimed agency over her life and her pregnancy. She returned to her work, to her firm, and to her community with renewed determination. The decision was both painful and empowering, highlighting the difficult balance between love and self-preservation. She carried with her a vision for the future, one where she would not have to negotiate her value or accept diminished support, a standard she intended to uphold for herself and for her child. The events of Thanksgiving 2022 set the stage for the months that followed. When separation became a necessity, communication was reduced to logistics, and the couple faced the looming reality of parenthood without a consistent partnership. The experience crystallized for Victoria the distinction between presence and absence, and the essential role that active support plays in sustaining both marriage and family. By February 2023, Victoria Green was 6 months into her pregnancy. The glow of expectancy she had once felt was tempered by the distance growing between her and Daniel. Their communication had dwindled to brief, transactional messages, texts about insurance coverage, prenatal appointments, and financial logistics. There was little warmth, no check-ins to ask how she was coping, no curiosity about the life developing within her. Daniel had moved into a corporate apartment in the Loop, citing convenience for early morning meetings and easier access to client offices. Victoria understood the practical reasoning, yet she could not ignore the emotional gap. His presence had become scarce, and the apartment, though temporary, symbolized the widening separation. Recognizing the toll on her spirit, Victoria's mother, Grace, flew in from Chicago. Grace had raised 3 children largely on her own after Victoria's father passed away, and she carried a quiet wisdom tempered by experience. Sitting beside Victoria in the nursery she had been slowly preparing, Grace offered perspective. "Your baby needs a father who will fight for her, yes," she said. "And sometimes the real question is whether the man you married loves enough to face his fears and stand by you." Victoria threw herself into preparations for motherhood, determined to provide stability for her daughter even without a fully present partner. She arranged the nursery with care, choosing colors and furniture that were soothing and functional. She coordinated with Patricia, her doula, ensuring that every stage of the upcoming birth would have professional support. Her sister Naomi planned to fly in from Atlanta to be at her side for the final weeks and the birth itself. Daniel's support was consistent in a financial sense. Bills were paid, prenatal care was arranged, and the necessary expenses were covered without hesitation. Yet he remained absent from the moments that mattered. He had missed the ultrasound where they saw their daughter's face clearly for the first time. He had missed prenatal classes, leaving Victoria to learn breathing techniques, positions, and labor preparation on her own. Each absence emphasized the imbalance between provision and presence, and Victoria carried the emotional weight with careful, steady resolve. Despite the challenges, she maintained her focus on both work and family. Green Designs continued to thrive, with Victoria leading her team through complex projects that demanded attention and creativity. Even as she navigated growing physical discomfort and the mental strain of impending motherhood, she maintained a disciplined routine. The months of preparation were as much about protecting her child's environment as they were about preserving her own sense of autonomy. Her due date, May 15th, arrived without any signs of labor. Doctors monitored her carefully, noting the absence of contractions and the need to ensure both her health and the baby's. They scheduled an induction for May 20th, giving Victoria a sense of structure amidst uncertainty. She found some comfort in the plan, yet remained aware that even this schedule would demand resilience, focus, and the support she could rely on. The weeks leading to the induction were a mix of anticipation and quiet anxiety. Victoria moved through each day methodically, finalizing plans, organizing the nursery, consulting with her doula, and maintaining professional obligations. She accepted the reality of facing much of this alone, aware that Daniel's emotional absence was now a pattern she could not ignore. Still, she kept a part of herself open to the possibility that he might act differently in the moments that mattered most. As May 18th approached, the night before the scheduled induction, Victoria was aware that the final phase of her pregnancy was imminent. Her body signaled that the process could begin at any moment. Each movement of her daughter inside her belly reminded her of the responsibility and strength required, not just physically but emotionally, to navigate labor without a consistent partner by her side. That night, as she prepared for rest, she reflected on the journey thus far. The professional victories, the careful planning, and the emotional endurance that had carried her this far. She knew that her support system, particularly her mother and doula, would be crucial in the hours ahead. Naomi's arrival from Atlanta was imminent, adding another layer of assurance. And then, as the early hours approached, Victoria felt a sensation different from the weeks of mild Braxton Hicks contractions. A rhythmic, growing discomfort told her that the final stage of pregnancy was beginning. She moved carefully, timed her breaths, and reached for her phone, considering whether to alert Daniel. The decision weighed heavily. He had been largely absent, yet this was their child, their daughter, and the reality of birth was now undeniable. May 18, 2023, 2 a.m., Victoria Green woke to a sensation that immediately demanded attention. The mild discomfort she had grown accustomed to over the past weeks had evolved into something unmistakable. Her body tensed with contractions, each wave of pain sharper, more urgent than the last. She gripped the bed rails, focusing on controlled breaths, trying to steady herself. She lay in her Gold Coast penthouse, high above the quiet city streets. The apartment, usually a haven, felt vast and empty in the early hours. Victoria's natural hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her hospital gown clinging to her sweat-soaked skin. She glanced at her phone, hesitating. Daniel had been largely absent for weeks, their last conversation tense and businesslike. She debated whether she should inform him. The thought of meeting him now, after so much distance, made her chest tighten. By 4:30 a.m., she had made a decision. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved quickly to type a simple message. In labor. Heading to Northwestern Memorial soon. Thought you should know. She pressed send without expectation. Daniel could be anywhere, on a plane, in a hotel room, or across the country for meetings. Her hope was cautious, tempered by months of emotional distance. Victoria shifted on the bed, timing her contractions, trying to remain calm. Each one pressed her toward inevitability, the realization that this labor would not wait for preparation or convenience. She reached for her water, took a sip, and sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the city below. At 6 a.m., her phone rang. The screen lit up with Daniel's name. Her heart raced as she answered. "I'm coming," his voice said, rough with panic and fatigue. "I'm getting on the first flight out. I'll be there. Just please wait for me." Victoria exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders giving way slightly. "Daniel, babies don't wait," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the contraction that made her knees buckle. There was a pause, then Daniel's voice broke with raw emotion. "I'm so sorry. For everything. But I'm coming. I promise." His words carried a weight of urgency and remorse she hadn't heard in months. For the first time, she felt the possibility of his presence as more than obligation. By 6:30 a.m., Victoria's mother, Grace, arrived, bringing reassurance and practicality. She helped her daughter prepare for the trip to the hospital, gathering the carefully packed bag with essentials and ensuring Victoria was steady on her feet. The city was waking around them as they drove east toward Streeterville. The streets, though still quiet, were alive with morning activity. Victoria focused on her breathing, timing each contraction, her body responding instinctively. Northwestern Memorial Hospital rose ahead, its modern towers reflecting the soft hues of sunrise over Lake Michigan. By 7:30 a.m., Victoria was checked into a birthing suite on the 7th floor. The room had large windows, offering a clear view of the lake where the early sun spread gold and pink across the water. Nurses guided her through registration and initial monitoring, noting she was 4 centimeters dilated, progressing, but with many hours still ahead. Patricia, her doula, arrived shortly after 8 a.m., bringing calm and focus. Her presence was a reminder of preparation and experience. She helped Victoria with breathing exercises, offered reassurance, and provided the small comforts that made the early stage of labor manageable. Victoria's sister, Naomi, arrived by 9 a.m., having secured an emergency flight from Atlanta. The sisters exchanged quiet smiles, an unspoken agreement that they would face the coming hours as a team. Despite the support of her mother, sister, and doula, Victoria's gaze kept returning to the door. Each sound of movement, each shadow that passed the threshold, drew her attention. She found herself imagining Daniel's arrival, uncertain if he would be present physically or emotionally. Her heart oscillated between hope and wariness. Labor was steady but slow. Contractions came in rhythm, growing stronger and closer together. Victoria focused on her techniques, but fatigue began to settle into her muscles. The small support team moved efficiently around her, Patricia adjusting pillows, Grace offering water and gentle touches, Naomi whispering encouragement. The room was filled with focused energy, yet Victoria's thoughts drifted to the possibility of Daniel entering at any moment. The minutes stretched, each one a measure of both pain and anticipation. She reviewed her birth plan silently, mentally preparing for options she might have to make later. Her body responded instinctively to each contraction, her mind alert to changes, her emotions balancing between exhaustion and resolve. Victoria's phone vibrated again, signaling a message. She glanced down briefly but chose to set it aside, returning to her breathing. The act of labor required presence, full attention, and letting go of everything that could distract from the body's natural rhythm. Throughout the morning, the anticipation built. The support team kept her focused, yet Victoria remained conscious of the missing piece, Daniel. Would he arrive in time to witness the birth, to offer the presence she had lacked for months? The question hovered over the room, unanswered, as contractions pressed relentlessly forward. By mid-morning, the hospital room had become a controlled space of preparation and waiting. Victoria, still 4 centimeters dilated, moved through each contraction with determination. Patricia reminded her to trust her body. Naomi offered quiet encouragement, and Grace stayed close with protective attention. Every sensation was magnified by months of solitude and preparation, every movement a testament to her endurance. The stage was set, the team ready, yet one central question remained. Would Daniel cross the threshold and be the partner she needed in this critical moment? By 10:30 a.m., the door to Victoria's birthing suite swung open with sudden force. Daniel Ashford stood in the doorway, suit wrinkled from travel, hair disheveled, eyes wide with a mixture of panic and determination. For a moment, the room held still, the usual hospital hum seeming to pause. Victoria's mother, Grace, studied him closely, evaluating the man who had been absent for months. Naomi's arms crossed lightly, skepticism in her gaze, while Patricia maintained professional neutrality, her expression calm but attentive. Victoria, in the midst of a contraction, barely registered him at first. The sudden appearance of her estranged husband, the man who had avoided nearly every significant moment of her pregnancy, felt surreal. Her fingers tightened instinctively around the bed rails. Daniel stepped forward, unsteady but purposeful, and reached for her hand. The touch was grounding, a reminder of shared history and the promise of presence, however overdue. He had not arrived without struggle. Hours earlier, Daniel had been in New York, frantically arranging the earliest flight back to Chicago. Each minute of delay felt like a threat to the moment he feared missing most. He had navigated the crowded terminals of O'Hare, navigating transport with a single-minded determination. By the time he burst into the hospital room, he was physically exhausted and emotionally raw, but fully focused on Victoria. The initial moments were awkward, heavy with unspoken tension. Grace's gaze measured him, assessing sincerity. Naomi's wary eyes followed his every movement. Patricia stepped slightly aside, allowing space while maintaining professional readiness. Daniel crouched beside Victoria, his hand gripping hers. His voice was quiet, steadying, despite the desperation lingering underneath. The next 8 hours became a test of endurance and cooperation. Daniel's role was not about romantic gestures. It was about partnership in its most immediate and essential form. He stayed by her side through each contraction, offering support through screams and tears, never flinching at her grip. When nausea overtook her, he held her hair gently and wiped her face with a cool cloth, focusing solely on her comfort. As labor progressed, the medical team noted that Victoria had stalled at 7 centimeters. Doctors discussed interventions, explaining options and necessary procedures. Daniel's posture stiffened. He asked precise questions, demanded clarity, and ensured that every decision aligned with Victoria's birth plan. "This is her body, her baby, her choice," he said firmly to a resident who suggested rushing the process. "We're going to give her time unless there's a medical emergency." Is there a medical emergency? Victoria, in that moment, saw the man she had once fallen in love with, the attentive, intelligent, engaged partner she had known, and a new version shaped by vulnerability and humility. He was present in ways that words alone could not capture, fully attentive to the experience she was navigating. His commitment was measured not in statements of intent, but in concrete actions. Staying by her side, advocating for her wishes, showing steadfast focus. The room became a space of relentless effort, both physical and emotional. Contractions continued, each wave drawing out the strength and endurance Victoria had built over months of preparation. Daniel mirrored her determination, his presence a constant that gave her a steady anchor in the intensity of labor. He anticipated her needs, read her subtle cues, and responded without hesitation. Hours passed with measured progress. Victoria leaned heavily on the support around her, Patricia adjusting positions and offering guidance, Grace providing reassurance and calm, Naomi contributing encouragement and quiet observation. And through it all, Daniel remained an unyielding presence, hands holding, voice steady, his focus entirely on Victoria. Evening began to settle over Chicago, the city lights shimmering in the distance outside the hospital windows. The view of the skyline and Lake Michigan became a backdrop to the labor's final stages. Each contraction drew Victoria closer to the culmination of hours of physical and emotional exertion. Daniel stayed close, mirroring her breaths, offering words of encouragement, silently bearing witness to her strength. By the time labor reached its peak, exhaustion weighed heavily on Victoria. She doubted her ability to continue, certain she could not endure further. Daniel's face was close to hers, holding her physically and emotionally. He met her eyes, offering grounding presence and unwavering support. "You can do this," he said. "You're the strongest person I know. You've always been. I've been so blind, Victoria. But I see you now. I see everything you are, everything you've been carrying alone. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Push, baby. Bring our daughter into this world." At 7:43 p.m., May 18th, 2023, Zoe Grace Green Ashford entered the world, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, a cap of dark curls atop her mother's rich brown skin, and her father's nose marking the blend of 2 lives converging. The newborn's cry filled the room with a sense of relief and awe. Both parents dissolved into tears, their emotions a mixture of joy, recognition, and the profound understanding of what they had almost missed. The moments immediately following the birth were a blend of wonder and fatigue. Daniel refused to leave Victoria's side. He marveled at Zoe, attending to her with tentative hands, learning the rhythms of diaper changes and feedings, his awe evident in every glance. Victoria rested, absorbing the simultaneous relief and elation of the successful birth. The second night in the hospital revealed Daniel's continuing commitment. He slept in an uncomfortable chair beside the bed, fully engaged in the care of his daughter. Each fumble in diaper changes, each whispered question about routines or feeding schedules, showed a man navigating unfamiliar territory with dedication. He observed Zoe intently, taking in every detail, his expressions shifting from confusion to wonder. During a quiet moment, Daniel initiated a conversation Victoria had anticipated but dreaded. He spoke with honesty about his fears and failures, acknowledging the distance he had allowed between them. "I was terrified," he admitted, "not of being a father, but of being a husband in a real sense. I've carried my family's expectations as armor, and in doing so, I failed you. I let you face so much alone." Victoria listened, exhausted, her mind processing the weight of the moment and the clarity in his voice. It was not an immediate forgiveness or resolution. Instead, it was recognition, a foundation upon which trust could be rebuilt. The honesty was raw and unfiltered, a mirror of the effort Daniel had made to be present in ways that mattered. By the end of those hours, the room had become more than a delivery suite. It was a space of transformation, where presence replaced absence, action replaced distance, and commitment took tangible form. Daniel's arrival and his steadfast support throughout the labor marked a turning point, a moment where the man Victoria had needed began to exist in reality, not just in hope or memory. In the quiet of the hospital room, after the exhaustion of birth had begun to settle, Daniel spoke with a vulnerability Victoria hadn't heard in years. He confessed the truth she had long suspected, yet still needed to hear directly. "I was terrified of being a real husband," he admitted, voice low and steady. "The Ashford men, they don't show up in ways that matter. I was raised to think success meant wealth, influence, and control, but not love, not partnership, not presence, and I carried that fear into our marriage. I was afraid of failing you." Victoria listened, her own emotions a mix of relief, anger, and careful curiosity. She held Zoe in one arm, feeling the rhythm of her daughter's breathing, and let the weight of Daniel's confession sink in. The words were raw, but they were honest. He continued, "I chose my family's approval over my family, over you and Zoe. I was focused on legacy, reputation, expectations. I see now how wrong that was." Her response was measured, acknowledging the hurt he had caused while refusing to minimize the impact. "You did fail me, Daniel," she said quietly but firmly. "You left me alone when I needed you most. You can't undo that. It's not just about words anymore, it's about action." Daniel nodded, taking in her perspective. "I know," he said. "I can't undo what I've done, but I can do better going forward. I will do better. I want to be the husband and father you both deserve." It was not a sudden resolution. Victoria needed space, time, and reassurance, and she made that clear. Therapy sessions were arranged for both individually and as a couple. Daniel took paternity leave, a milestone that no Ashford man had attempted in 3 generations. He showed up consistently, midnight feedings, diaper changes, researching pediatricians, learning routines and rhythms, asking questions, and sometimes fumbling but always persisting. The real transformation extended beyond the hospital room. Daniel insisted on being present for Zoe, allowing Victoria to rest, focus on her own recovery, and rebuild her sense of agency as a mother. Each day, he demonstrated commitment through the small, consistent actions that mattered most. Reading bedtime stories, helping with meals, and keeping appointments that previously would have been dismissed as inconvenient. The Ashford family dynamic faced a test of its own. Daniel arranged a meeting at the University Club in Chicago, holding Zoe in a carrier against his chest. He addressed his family with clarity and determination. Catherine Ashford, his mother, confronted the reality of her son's new priorities. Daniel's voice was steady but unyielding. "The Ashford name isn't worth anything if it's built on making the people I love feel less than. Choose to embrace your family, or miss out on your granddaughter's life. The choice is yours." This confrontation marked a shift, not only in his personal priorities, but also in the legacy he intended to create for his own child. It was a declaration that family mattered more than old expectations, that presence and engagement were the new standard he intended to uphold. Victoria and Daniel began the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding their marriage. They moved into a Bronzeville brownstone, reconnecting with the neighborhood that had shaped Victoria's upbringing. Daniel opened a Chicago office for Ashford Properties, ensuring that he could remain local and engaged. The changes were not seamless, and old habits lingered, but the effort was visible, consistent, and intentional. Victoria's professional life flourished as well. Green Designs continued to grow, receiving recognition for innovative, community-centered projects. Her victories in architecture became a shared pride, with Daniel supporting her endeavors not as an observer, but as an engaged partner who celebrated her achievements and offered guidance when requested. They were not perfect. There were moments of tension, miscommunication, and lingering doubts. Yet the foundation of their relationship had shifted. Presence, accountability, and tangible support became the pillars upon which they rebuilt trust. Heroism, Victoria realized, was not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in showing up consistently when it mattered most. Love without action had proven insufficient. Presence, advocacy, and care were what truly defined commitment. The delivery room had provided a first lesson. Daniel had arrived not just for the moment of birth, but for every step leading to it, learning that partnership required engagement even in uncomfortable or inconvenient circumstances. Victoria reflected on the importance of vulnerability, courage, and daily commitment. These were not abstract concepts. They were the tangible actions that sustained life, family, and love. By the time Zoe was 6 months old, the couple had established routines that balanced parenting responsibilities and professional lives. Therapy continued, offering tools to communicate effectively, navigate conflicts, and maintain emotional honesty. Daniel attended every milestone he could, often arriving early or staying late, ensuring that he was consistently present for the people who mattered most. Victoria and Daniel's journey became a testament to the idea that reconciliation and transformation were possible, even after long periods of absence or estrangement. Real partnership required more than words. It demanded choices, time, and persistence. Each day of presence, each intentional act of care, became a building block in the family they had chosen to prioritize over social expectations or old patterns. Their story closed on the understanding that heroism often appears in small, repeated actions rather than dramatic moments. Showing up, choosing presence, and committing to consistent support were what defined true courage in partnership. Love without action held no weight, but love lived through accountability, dedication, and shared responsibility could thrive. The narrative came full circle. From the delivery room, where Daniel's arrival marked the beginning of visible change, to the ongoing daily life of a family rebuilt, the lesson remained clear. The measure of love and commitment is not in intention alone, but in consistent, tangible choices. Vulnerability, courage, and daily engagement were the essential ingredients for sustaining a family and nurturing a marriage that could withstand challenges and grow stronger. Victoria and Daniel continued forward, imperfect but present, learning from mistakes and building the future together. Their story reminded those who watched that showing up is the simplest and most profound form of heroism, and that love without follow-through carries little meaning. Thank you for joining this journey. Share where you're watching from, subscribe to receive tomorrow's story, and remember, consistent presence, care, and commitment are the quiet acts that shape lasting love.